Dr. Heijin Park stared at the email on his computer screen. He read it 3 times to make sure he wasn't dreaming. The message was from the Earth Science Council, telling him he had been chosen to represent humanity at the Galactic Science Institute. His hand shook as he pushed back from his desk. The small office around him was messy, with papers stuck to every wall and notebooks piled on every surface. Each page contained his ideas about quantum physics, ideas that other scientists on Earth had called too strange or impossible. But now, those same strange ideas had caught the attention of the aliens who ran the biggest research center in the galaxy. Heijin walked to his window and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, floating between the stars, was the massive space station where he would soon work. Earth had only joined the Galactic Coalition 3 months ago, and this was the first time they had asked for a human scientist to join their research team. The next morning, Heijin's peaceful mood was broken by angry voices from his computer. He was in a video meeting with the Earth Science Council, and many of the other scientists were not happy. Dr. Park's theories about quantum entanglement are ridiculous, said one old professor, his face red with anger. If we send him to represent Earth, the aliens will think we're stupid. His work is too different from standard physics, said another scientist. We should send someone who follows the normal rules. Heijin sat quietly, listening to them argue. He had heard these complaints many times before. His ideas about how particles could connect across space and time were different from what most scientists believed. But he knew he was right. He just needed a chance to prove it. The argument stopped when Dr. Tae-ri Kim, his former research partner, spoke up. Heijin thinks differently from us, and that's exactly why we should send him, she said firmly. The aliens already know our standard physics. They need to see how humans can think in new ways. While the Earth scientists argued, the aliens were having their own debate. In the Galactic Science Institute's main meeting room, Chief Researcher Du Yunli was not happy about accepting a human scientist. Humans have only just learned to travel between their planets, Du Yun said to the other alien researchers. Their science is like a child's drawing compared to our perfect equations. But Dr. Sangmin Kang, a younger researcher, disagreed. I've read Dr. Park's work, he said. It's strange, yes, but there's something interesting about how humans see connections that we miss. Maybe we need their different way of thinking. Back on Earth, Heijin began to pack his small apartment. He carefully stored his research notes on data tablets and picked out his favorite books about physics. As he worked, his phone rang. It was Jae-yun Choi, Earth's diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council. Dr. Park, she said, her voice serious. I need to make sure you understand what's at stake. You're not just representing yourself or even just Earth's scientists. You're representing all of humanity. The aliens will judge our whole species based on your work. Heijin nodded, even though she couldn't see him through the phone. I understand, he said quietly, but I also know I'm right about my theories, and maybe being different from the aliens is exactly what humanity needs right now. That night, Heijin stood on his balcony one last time. Tomorrow, he would leave Earth on an alien ship. He looked at the stars again, but this time he smiled. Everyone thought sending him was a mistake, both humans and aliens. But Heijin knew something they didn't. Sometimes the biggest mistakes led to the biggest discoveries. He was ready to show the galaxy what human creativity could do. Heijin pressed his face against the spaceship's window as they approached the Galactic Science Institute. The space station was enormous. It looked like someone had built a small city in space. Rings of metal and glass spun slowly around a central tower that glowed with blue light. Hundreds of spaceships moved around it like busy bees around a giant hive. Amazing, isn't it? Jae-yun Choi stood next to him, straightening her diplomatic uniform. The station has over 10,000 scientists from 50 different species. You're the first human who will work here. Their ship docked smoothly at one of the many landing bays. Heijin grabbed his bags, which contained his clothes, research tablets, and a small box of his favorite instant ramen. He had heard the station's food was strange, and he wanted something familiar from home. As they walked through the station's bright corridors, He-Jin saw aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some had blue skin and 4 arms, others floated in bubbles of liquid, and a few looked like walking crystals. Many of them stopped to stare at him. Humans were still new to the galaxy, and not many aliens had seen one up close. Chief Researcher Do-Yoon Lee was waiting for them in a large office with walls made of clear glass. Through the walls, He-Jin could see the endless space and stars beyond. Do-Yoon was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. "Dr. Park," Do-Yoon said, his voice cold. "Welcome to the Institute. I hope you will find the work here not too difficult for your human mind to understand." Jae-yun frowned at the insult, but He-Jin kept his face calm. He had dealt with doubters before. "Thank you for accepting me," He-Jin said politely. "I'm eager to learn from the Institute's great minds." Do-Yoon touched a screen on his desk, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a complex pattern of swirling energy. "This will be your project," he said. "For 30 years, we have tried to understand why these energy patterns appear in certain star systems. It's a simple problem, really. Perhaps even a human could help." He-Jin looked at the pattern carefully. His heart beat faster. He recognized something in those swirls. They reminded him of his quantum entanglement theories, but he kept his excitement hidden. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. Dr. Sang-Min Kang, who had been standing quietly in a corner, stepped forward. His skin was deep purple, and his eyes looked like swirling galaxies. "I'll show Dr. Park to his laboratory," he offered. As they walked through more corridors, Sang-Min spoke softly. "Don't let Do-Yoon bother you. He treats all new scientists this way, especially those from younger species." He-Jin's laboratory was bigger than his whole apartment back on Earth. One wall was covered in screens showing different scientific readings. Another had tanks of strange liquids and crystals that glowed with inner light. There was even a quantum computer that looked more advanced than anything on Earth. "The Institute's computer network is available to you," Sang-Min explained, "but some areas are restricted. You'll need special permission to access advanced research data." After Sang-Min left, He-Jin sat at his new desk and looked at the hologram of his assigned project. He smiled to himself. Do-Yoon thought he was giving He-Jin a simple puzzle to keep him busy. But He-Jin could see that this simple problem was connected to his own theories about quantum physics in ways the aliens hadn't noticed. He pulled out his research tablets and began to work. The aliens thought humans were too simple to understand advanced science. He-Jin was going to prove them wrong. He just had to be careful about how he did it. Outside his laboratory window, the stars twinkled as if they were sharing his secret. 2 weeks had passed since He-Jin began working at the Galactic Science Institute. He spent most of his time in his laboratory, studying the strange energy patterns that appeared in certain star systems. While other scientists walked past his lab, they often whispered and pointed, wondering what the human could possibly understand about such complex science. But He-Jin had found something amazing. Late one night, when most of the other scientists had left for their rest periods, he sat at his desk staring at his computer screens. The swirling energy patterns that Do-Yoon had given him as a simple project were dancing in front of his eyes. "Computer, show me the pattern again. But this time, think of it like water," He-Jin said quietly. The computer changed the display, and suddenly the energy looked like flowing streams. This was something the aliens had never tried. They always thought of energy as rigid and fixed, but He-Jin thought of it as fluid and moving. As he watched, he noticed something that made his heart jump. The energy wasn't just moving randomly. It was following a pattern that looked exactly like his quantum entanglement theories from Earth. The aliens had missed it because they were too focused on complicated mathematics. They never thought to look at it in a simple, natural way. He-Jin quickly saved his findings on his private research tablet. He knew he had to be careful. If he announced his discovery too soon, Do-Yoon and the others might dismiss it just because it came from a human. He needed proof that was impossible to ignore. The next morning, while He-Jin was getting breakfast in the station's food hall, Dr. Sang-Min Kang sat down next to him. He-Jin was eating his instant ramen, which made some aliens wrinkle their noses in curiosity at the strange human food. "You've been working late," Sang-Min said, his galaxy-like eyes twinkling. "Have you found anything interesting?" He-Jin looked around carefully, then pulled out his tablet. "Can I trust you?" he asked quietly. When Sang-Min nodded, He-Jin showed him the pattern he had discovered. Sang-Min's eyes grew wider as he looked at He-Jin's work. This is not what we expected," he said softly. "You're seeing the energy as a flowing system, not as separate parts. None of us thought to do that. On Earth, we have an old saying," He-Jin explained. "Sometimes you can't see the forest because you're too focused on the trees. I think the Institute's scientists know so much advanced math that they missed the simple pattern underneath." Sang-Min thought for a moment. "I can help you access more research data," he offered. "There are other star systems we studied that might show the same pattern. But we must be careful. Some scientists here don't like their old ideas being challenged." For the next few days, He-Jin and Sang-Min worked together in secret. Sang-Min used his security clearance to show He-Jin data from similar star systems across the galaxy. Each time, He-Jin found the same flowing pattern that matched his theories. One evening, as they were working late, the laboratory door opened unexpectedly. Chief Researcher Do-Yoon walked in, his silver skin gleaming in the dim light. He-Jin quickly switched his screen to show something else, but Do-Yoon had seen enough to make him suspicious. "Working hard on your simple project, Dr. Park?" Do-Yoon asked, his voice cold. "Or are you wasting the Institute's resources on your primitive human theories?" He-Jin met Do-Yoon's eyes calmly. "I'm making good progress," he said. "Sometimes the simplest projects can lead to surprising discoveries." After Do-Yoon left, Sang-Min looked worried. "He suspects something," he said. "We need to be more careful." He-Jin nodded, but he wasn't too worried. He knew he was right about his discovery, and soon he would have enough proof to show everyone. The aliens thought humans were too simple to understand advanced science, but sometimes the simplest way of looking at things was exactly what was needed to solve the hardest problems. The main meeting room of the Galactic Science Institute was packed with scientists from every corner of the galaxy. They had all come because Chief Researcher Do-Yoon had called an emergency meeting. He-Jin sat quietly in his chair, knowing this meeting was about him. Do-Yoon stood at the front of the room, his silver skin shining under the bright lights. "My fellow researchers," he began, "I have noticed some disturbing activities in our newest member's laboratory. Dr. Park seems to think he can solve problems that have puzzled our greatest minds for centuries." The room filled with whispers. Some aliens looked at He-Jin with curiosity, others with doubt. Jae-Yun Choi, sitting next to He-Jin, grabbed his arm nervously. "Therefore," Do-Yoon continued, "I propose a challenge. 3 problems that no one in the galaxy has solved. If our human guest thinks he is so clever, let him try these." A large screen appeared in the air, showing 3 different scientific puzzles. He-Jin looked at them carefully. The first showed a strange pattern of quantum particles that wouldn't follow normal physics rules. The second was about energy that disappeared and reappeared in different parts of space without traveling between them. The third showed stars that moved in ways that seemed impossible. "These problems have been studied by our best scientists for over 50 years, Do-Yoon said. "No one has found the answers. Dr. Park, do you dare to try?" Before He-Jin could speak, Jae-Yun stood up. "This is unfair," she said. "You can't expect one scientist to solve problems that entire teams couldn't figure out." But He-Jin gently touched her arm, making her sit down. He stood up slowly and looked around the room. He could see Sang-Min watching him with worried eyes. But He-Jin wasn't worried. He was excited. These 3 problems looked exactly like the patterns he had been studying in his lab. "I accept the challenge," He Jin said clearly. The room erupted in surprised noises. Some aliens laughed, thinking he was being foolish. Others looked interested, wondering what made this human so confident. You have 1 month, Du Yun announced. If you fail, you will leave the Institute and return to Earth. And humanity will have to wait another 10 years before sending another scientist. Jian jumped up again. You can't make that decision. The Earth Science Council has already agreed. Du Yun interrupted. They want to prove that humans belong here. Now they have their chance. After the meeting, Jian followed He Jin back to his lab. Are you crazy? She asked. Those problems are famous throughout the galaxy. Even the smartest aliens couldn't solve them. That's exactly why I have a chance, He Jin explained. The aliens are too smart. They make things too complicated. These problems need someone who can see them in a simple way. Later that night, He Jin received a message from Dr. Tae-ri back on Earth. I heard about the challenge, she wrote. The council is nervous, but I know you can do this. Remember what we learned in graduate school. Sometimes the hardest problems have the simplest answers. He Jin smiled at her message. He looked at the 3 problems floating on his screens. Where others saw impossible puzzles, he saw patterns that reminded him of things from Earth. The way water flowed around rocks, how sound waves bounced off walls, how light bent through crystals. He opened his research notes and began to work. The aliens thought they were testing him, but really, they had just given him a perfect chance to prove his theories were right. Sometimes the best way to outsmart the smartest minds in the galaxy was to think like a simple human. He Jin sat in his laboratory late at night, surrounded by glowing screens showing the 3 impossible problems. He had been working for a week now, but he knew he needed help. Just then, his computer made a soft beeping sound. A message had arrived from Earth. The screen showed Dr. Tae-ri's familiar face. She looked tired. It was the middle of the night on Earth, but her eyes were bright with excitement. He Jin, I've been thinking about your challenges, she said. Remember our old experiments with quantum particles? How they seem to dance instead of just move? He Jin smiled. Tae-ri always had a way of making complicated science feel simple. The aliens here don't think about particles that way, he told her. They use very complex math to explain everything. That's exactly why you'll solve these problems, Tae-ri said. Humans are good at seeing patterns in nature. While the aliens look at their equations, you look at the way things actually behave. They talked for hours, sharing ideas. Tae-ri sent him their old research data from Earth. It wasn't as advanced as the alien science, but it showed how humans thought about physics in a different way. The next morning, Dr. Sang-min came to He Jin's lab carrying a small device that looked like a crystal cube. This will help you access the restricted research database, he whispered. I'm not supposed to give it to you, but I believe you're onto something important. He Jin held the cube carefully. Why are you helping me? He asked. Won't you get in trouble? Sang-min's galaxy-like eyes twinkled. For too long, we've all thought the same way about science, he said. The Institute needs someone who sees things differently. Besides, I've watched you work. You notice things we miss. With Sang-min's help, He Jin found research papers about similar problems from all over the galaxy. Many scientists had tried to solve these puzzles, but they all used the same complicated approach. No one had tried He Jin's simple way of looking at things. One evening, while He Jin was studying the first problem about quantum particles, Chae-yun brought him dinner. She had noticed he often forgot to eat when he was working. The Earth Council is worried, she told him. But they're also proud. No matter what happens, you've shown the galaxy that humans aren't afraid to take on big challenges. As He Jin ate, his screen suddenly filled with warning messages. Someone was trying to break into his computer system. Someone's attacking your research data, Chae-yun said, looking worried. But He Jin stayed calm. It's okay, he said. Tae-ri helped me create special backups. We knew something like this might happen. That night, He couldn't sleep. He walked to the station's observation deck, a huge room with windows showing the stars. As he stood there, thinking about all the people helping him, Tae-ri from Earth, Sang-min with his secret access, and Jae-yun with her quiet support, he realized something important. The aliens thought being advanced meant working alone and keeping secrets, but humans knew that the best discoveries happened when people worked together and shared ideas. Maybe that was humanity's real strength. He-jin looked at the stars and smiled. He had 2 more weeks to solve the problems, but he wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes the smartest thing a scientist could do was accept help from others who believed in them. The first breakthrough came early one morning, 2 weeks into the challenge. He-jin had been staring at the quantum particle problem for hours, watching the particles move in strange ways on his screen. They reminded him of leaves floating in a stream, moving in patterns that seemed random, but actually followed the water's flow. "Computer," he said quietly, "show me the particles again, but this time, show me the space between them too." The display changed, and suddenly He-jin saw what everyone had missed. The particles weren't moving randomly. They were following invisible currents of energy, just like leaves in a stream. He-jin worked faster now, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he wrote down his solution. He used simple Earth physics about fluid movements to explain the complex quantum patterns, where alien scientists had written equations hundreds of pages long. He-jin's solution was just 2 pages. It was so simple that at first, he worried he had made a mistake. He called Tae-ri on Earth to check his work. When she saw his solution, she gasped. "He-jin, this is brilliant," she said. "You're showing that quantum particles follow natural flow patterns, just like water or air. The aliens never thought of that, because they don't have oceans on their worlds." He-jin decided to present his solution that afternoon. Word spread quickly through the station, and soon the main lecture hall was full. Scientists of all species crowded in to see what the human had discovered. Do-yoon sat in the front row, his silver skin gleaming with doubt. As He-jin explained his solution, using simple pictures of streams and leaves to show how the quantum particles moved, the room grew very quiet. Even Do-yoon leaned forward, his eyes wide with surprise. When He-jin finished speaking, no one said anything for a long moment. Then one of the older scientists, a being made of pure light, floated forward. "We've been studying this problem for 50 years, she said. "We wrote millions of equations, but we never thought to look at it this way. Dr. Park, your solution is perfect." The room burst into excited talk. Many scientists rushed to shake He-jin's hand or touch their tentacles to his shoulder in congratulation. But not everyone was happy. As He-jin left the lecture hall, he heard angry whispers from a group of scientists. "He must have cheated," one said. "No human could solve this problem." "He's making us look foolish," another growled. "We should stop him before he tries to solve the other problems." That night, when He-jin returned to his lab, he found his computer had been tampered with. Someone had tried to delete his research data. Luckily, he had followed Tae-ri's advice and kept secret backups. But the attack worried him. Sang-min came to check on him. "You've made some powerful enemies," he warned. "They're afraid because you proved humans can think in ways we can't. Be careful. They might try to stop you from solving the other problems." He-jin nodded, but he wasn't going to give up. He had solved one impossible problem by looking at it in a simple, human way. He could solve the others too. He just had to be careful and remember that sometimes the people most afraid of new ideas were the ones who thought they knew everything. 1 week after solving the first problem, He-jin faced the second challenge, explaining why energy disappeared from one place and appeared in another without traveling between them. The aliens had spent decades trying to understand how this was possible. Their complex mathematics said it couldn't happen, yet their instruments showed it did. He-jin sat in his lab, drinking his last cup of instant ramen soup as he thought about the problem. On his screen, he watched recordings of the energy vanishing and reappearing. Something about it reminded him of an old Earth experiment he had done with Tairi, using two cups connected by a hidden tube. What if the energy isn't actually disappearing? He said to himself. What if it's traveling through a path we can't see? He called Tairi that evening to share his idea. Remember how we used to think about quantum entanglement? He asked. How two particles could be connected like they were holding hands, even when they were far apart. Tairi's eyes lit up. Yes, and we always said it was like they had a secret tunnel between them that we couldn't see. He-Jin worked through the night, combining his quantum entanglement theories with the strange energy movements. He drew diagrams showing how space itself might fold, creating invisible shortcuts that the energy could use. It was like taking a piece of paper and folding it so two distant points touched. The next morning, Sang-min found He-Jin asleep at his desk, surrounded by drawings. When He-Jin woke up and explained his idea, Sang-min's galaxy eyes grew wider. This changes everything we thought we knew about space, he said, but it makes so much sense. He-Jin decided to test his theory. He set up an experiment using the Institute's advanced equipment. He would try to create one of these invisible pathways himself, using the principles he had discovered. Many alien scientists gathered to watch, some hoping he would fail. The experiment room hummed with energy. He-Jin had placed two quantum sensors on opposite sides of the room. According to the aliens' equations, energy could only travel between the sensors in a straight line. But He-Jin believed he could make it take a shortcut through folded space. Beginning test, he announced. The room grew quiet. Even Do-yoon leaned forward in his seat. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then one sensor began to glow. A moment later, the other sensor lit up with exactly the same energy pattern. The energy had jumped between them instantly, without traveling through the space between. Impossible, someone shouted. The equations say this can't happen. But He-Jin smiled. He pressed a button, and a new display appeared. It showed the invisible pathway he had created, a tunnel through folded space that connected the 2 points. The equations weren't wrong, he explained. They just didn't know about these shortcuts. The room erupted in chaos. Some scientists rushed to examine his equipment. Others argued loudly about whether this violated the laws of physics. Do-yoon sat very still, his silver skin pale with shock. An older alien scientist approached He-Jin. Young human, she said, you haven't just solved the energy movement problem. You've shown us that our understanding of space itself was incomplete. But not everyone was convinced. Some scientists left the room muttering angrily about human tricks and fake results. One of them looked at He-Jin with cold eyes and said, "The third challenge will be your downfall. No one can solve the mystery of the impossible star movements." He-Jin watched them go, feeling both proud and worried. He had solved 2 of the 3 problems, but he knew the third would be the hardest. And now he had made even more enemies among the alien scientists who didn't want their old ideas to change. He-Jin had only 3 days left to solve the final challenge. The problem of stars moving in impossible ways had confused scientists for centuries. These stars seemed to dance through space, ignoring the basic rules of gravity and motion that all other stars followed. In his laboratory, He-Jin watched recordings of these strange stars. His eyes were tired, and his last pack of instant ramen sat untouched on his desk. Something about this problem was different from the others. It wasn't just about physics or energy. There was something more mysterious happening. What are we missing? He asked himself, rubbing his eyes. He had tried every approach he could think of, but nothing worked. Even his simple way of looking at things wasn't helping this time. Late that night, He-Jin received an urgent message from Tairi. "He-Jin, I've been thinking about those stars," she said. "Remember when we were students and we learned about old Earth cultures? Many of them believed that everything in nature was connected. The stars, the Earth, and even human thoughts." He-Jin sat up straight. "What if," he said slowly, What if these stars are connected to something we can't see? Not just through space, like in the second problem, but connected in a different way. He worked through the night, combining everything he had learned. He used his ideas about quantum particles flowing like water from the first problem. He added his theory about hidden connections from the second problem. But this time, he added something new. He started thinking about how the stars might be responding to patterns in space itself. The next morning, Jia-Yun found him still working. His screens were filled with new kinds of diagrams that showed space not just as empty darkness, but as something alive with patterns and rhythms. The stars aren't moving wrong, He-Jin explained excitedly. They're moving exactly right. They're dancing to the rhythm of space itself. It's like they're following music we couldn't hear before. He spent the next day preparing his presentation. This was his biggest discovery yet, but it was also the hardest to explain. How could he help others understand something so strange in a simple way? That evening in the main lecture hall, He-Jin faced the largest crowd yet. Even aliens from other research stations had come to watch. Do-Yoon sat in his usual front row seat, looking both worried and curious. He-Jin started his presentation differently this time. Instead of showing equations or diagrams, he played a recording of waves moving on Earth's oceans. Then he showed wind moving through trees, and finally, a group of dancers moving together. Nature is full of patterns that look random but aren't, he explained. These stars are following patterns too. Patterns in the structure of space itself. We couldn't see these patterns before because we were looking for the wrong thing. We thought space was empty, but it's full of rhythms and movements, like a giant dance. He showed his new model of space, with its flowing patterns that the stars followed. The room was completely silent. Even the scientists who had doubted him before were leaning forward, trying to understand this new way of seeing the universe. When he finished speaking, Do-Yoon stood up slowly. "Dr. Park," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "you haven't just solved the problem of the moving stars. You've shown us that the entire universe is more amazing than we imagined." He-Jin smiled, feeling both tired and happy. He had done more than solve 3 impossible problems. He had helped everyone see the universe in a new way, through human eyes. 1 month after He-Jin solved the final challenge, the Galactic Science Institute looked very different. The main hall was decorated for a special ceremony, with lights of all colors floating in the air. Scientists from every corner of the galaxy had come to attend this historic event. He-Jin stood nervously in a side room, wearing his best Earth suit. Jia-Yun was helping him fix his tie while Sang-min watched with amused galaxy eyes. Through a window, they could see hundreds of alien scientists taking their seats in the main hall. "I can't believe this is happening," He-Jin said quietly. "Just 2 months ago, they thought humans were too simple to understand advanced science. You showed them that being simple isn't the same as being wrong," Sang-min replied. "Sometimes the simplest answer is the best one." A large screen in the hall showed Tae-ri and the Earth Science Council watching from Earth. Tae-ri was smiling proudly. She had helped He-Jin through all his challenges, even from so far away. Chief researcher Do-Yoon stepped onto the stage, his silver skin glowing more brightly than usual. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "Today, we admit we were wrong," Do-Yoon said clearly. "We thought advanced science meant making things more complicated. Dr. He-Jin Park showed us that true understanding often comes from seeing things in a simpler way." Do-Yoon turned to face He-Jin, who had now walked onto the stage. "Dr. Park, you have earned the highest honor the Institute can give, the Star of Innovation. But more importantly, you have changed how we think about science itself." As Do-Yoon placed the crystal star medal around He-Jin's neck, the room erupted in applause. Even the scientists who had once doubted him were cheering. They had learned that new ideas, even from a younger species, could solve problems that had stumped them for centuries. But Do-Yoon wasn't finished. Because of Dr. Park's success, We are creating a new research division. It will bring together scientists from all species to combine different ways of thinking. Dr. Park will lead this division, helping us learn from each other's perspectives. He-Jin stepped up to speak. His voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger as he talked. "Thank you for this honor," he said. "But I didn't succeed because I was smarter than anyone else. I succeeded because I looked at problems differently. Every species in the galaxy has something unique to teach us. Together, we can understand the universe in ways none of us could alone." After the ceremony, He-Jin stood with his friends in his new office. It was much bigger than his old laboratory, with windows showing the stars he had helped everyone understand better. On his desk sat his last pack of instant ramen. He had decided to keep it as a reminder of where he started. "What will you do first with your new division?" Jae-yun asked. He-Jin smiled. "I want to find more problems that everyone thinks are impossible," he said. "But this time, we'll solve them together, combining human creativity with alien knowledge." Sang-min pointed to a group of young alien scientists waiting outside the office. "It looks like you already have volunteers," he said. "They all want to learn your way of thinking." As He-Jin welcomed his new team, he thought about how much had changed. He had come to the Institute hoping to prove that humans belonged in galactic science. Instead, he had shown that the best discoveries happen when different species work together, each bringing their own way of seeing the universe. The stars twinkled outside his window, dancing their cosmic dance that he had helped everyone understand. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come not from knowing more, but from seeing things in a new, simpler way.